Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of the Pack-A-Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. And of course, please make sure to subscribe below, comment, like, etc. Help out the algorithm, help out the podcast. I would greatly appreciate that. But more than anything, just thank you so much for being here. We do have a decent amount of news and notes that we'll go over first, and then we'll get to our main topic, which today is going to be Keisean Nixon. First and foremost, we had Kenny Clark, who did officially restructure his contract, and that opened up a little over $11 million in salary cap space. If you've been following along, this was certainly expected. This was one of the levers they were almost going to have to pull no matter what. So not unexpected. And we heard from Brian Gutekunst just 2 days ago now that this was going to be something that got done. So this should be of no surprise, but it officially is completed. And again, 11 plus million opened up in salary cap space. Quick update on Aaron Rodgers. Nothing major today, but I know, there's different sources out there, right? There's the Bob McGinns, there's the Adam Schefters, there's everyone, right? I will say, I think one of the most respected and just really, really smart, really, really great journalists that is covering the Green Bay Packers is Tom Silverstein. I have the utmost of respect for Tom. And if you want to talk about somebody that just goes about his job and does everything he can to provide great content, that's just Tom. That's just who he is. His article on PackersNews.com was, quote, "There's no mistaking it. The Packers are trying to move on from Aaron Rodgers." Now, if you read the article, which I highly recommend doing, a couple things. A, there's no smoking gun in the article. There's nothing that a source directly with the Green Bay Packers said that they are moving on from Aaron Rodgers and trying everything they can to do so. There's nothing like that. Secondly, it's extremely similar to the episode that I put out yesterday and sort of going over how Brian Gutekunst conducted his press conference. And for somebody who's been doing this a long time and has covered the Favre saga and another Favre saga and numerous Rodgers sagas, it's just a really interesting read. So I would highly recommend checking that out. And again, if you question some of the other, sources, things like that, like Tom's one of the best and one of the, just highest of levels of integrity. So that was an interesting one, and certainly one that I told you guys the other day, I don't read very many articles. That was when I stopped in my tracks and I'm reading this right now. Because again, when Tom says something like that, it holds a lot of weight. So again, his article, there's no mistaking it. The Packers are trying to move on from Aaron Rodgers. Highly recommend checking that out. Another note on Rodgers, according to Vic Tafur, who does a fantastic job for covering the Raiders for The Athletic, says that the Raiders are not interested in Aaron Rodgers. Now, I tend to, based on the article and based on some other articles that have been written about this, I tend to kind of take this at face value that maybe the Raiders aren't really looking to go in this direction. This is NFL GM liar season, and a lot of times teams are positioning themselves for, whether it be trades or draft or all of it, right? So this could easily be positioning where the Raiders are saying, we don't really, we're not really interested in that guy. Maybe if something came along the road where we could get him for a 7th round pick, maybe we'd have those discussions, but we're not really interested. And of course, they very well may be interested, even if they're not, right? Even if the Raiders right now are like, we need a young quarterback, we need to start building for the future, we need to go in a different direction, trading for Aaron Rodgers doesn't make the most sense. If Aaron Rodgers calls the Raiders and says, "You're my team, that's where I want to play," Davante Adams takes a stroll up the steps to the general manager's office and says, "I want to play with Aaron," or "I want out," or whatever the case may be. I'm not saying he would do that, but I want Aaron on this team. Aaron needs to be the quarterback. All of a sudden, Josh McDaniels reevaluates things a little bit and is like, all right, Aaron wants to play here. Davante wants Aaron here. Probably the majority of the rest of the team wants Aaron here. And I'm on thin ice if I'm Josh McDaniels, right? He needs to win right now. So if all of a sudden that comes to fruition, that thinking might change rather quick. So even if their best intention right now is not interested in Aaron Rodgers, which I'm not even saying that that's necessarily the case, I think that can ultimately change at a moment's notice, especially if it's the Raiders that Aaron would ultimately want to play for. But as of right now, per Vic Tafur, per The Athletic, the Raiders are not interested in Aaron Rodgers, which of course would be bad news for Green Bay if he does end up wanting a trade, or if Green Bay wants to trade him, and that's the end result in this. You want as many teams bidding over Aaron as possible. Maybe they have enough teams bidding even without the Raiders, but the more teams bidding, the more capital you're probably going to get in return, the more options Aaron Rodgers has. Hopefully, the more open he is to multiple teams, which again can drive up that price. So if the Raiders are in fact truly not interested, that would be a little bit of a just a bummer if, again, this does come to fruition where Green Bay does end up ultimately trying to trade Aaron Rodgers. All right, moving on. Oh, one more thing on Rodgers really quick. If you listen to any of the podcasts, which I did not with Aaron, I don't even know the guy's name. I couldn't bring myself to do another podcast or whatever. But I did read the notes. And one thing I'll say really quick, and you guys know my feelings on what I think is best for the Green Bay Packers moving forward. And I think ultimately, as I've said on numerous occasions, I think that's just going in a different direction. That's not even a real slight on Aaron Rodgers, as it is just weighing out what the salary cap situation is moving forward, the state of the team, all of those sort of things, right? So just based on that, you guys know what my thought process is on it. But I will say this. If the ultimate outcome of this entire situation is that Aaron is back and that he's quarterback of the team and that's the direction they go in, I do think there's a very good chance that we see chip on the shoulder, ticked off, ready to go Aaron Rodgers. And that's a really good Aaron Rodgers to have. That's an Aaron Rodgers that not a lot of other teams in the NFC want to see. And if that's the Aaron Rodgers that you get, and he's ticked off and he's got a chip on his shoulder and he wants to go and prove everyone wrong, the Packers wrong, the league wrong, the media wrong, Andy Herman wrong, whatever the case may be, right? If he's chip on the shoulder, pissed off, I'm going to go win MVP again, Aaron Rodgers, that's not the worst place to be in the world, right? Just in a vacuum, that's a decent spot to be in if you can have that guy as your quarterback in any given season, right? And I'll just say this. If you have MVP Aaron Rodgers, if you have an MVP caliber quarterback on your team in any season, and he goes out and just shreds and rips it up in 2023, you've got a puncher's chance at the Super Bowl with almost any team, right? If your quarterback is playing at an MVP level as one of the best players in the league, as one of the best quarterbacks in the league, you've got a puncher's chance. So if that is in fact the ultimate outcome, even though again, it's not what I would highly recommend based on the current state of the team, if that is the outcome, and if we do get Aaron Rodgers pissed off, chip on the shoulder, like I said, it's not the worst case scenario in the world, right? So we'll see what ultimately happens. All right. News on the Detroit Lions of all teams. And it's not really Detroit Lions that I care about all that much here. It's more a commentary on the Green Bay Packers. The Lions have apparently agreed to terms with former head coach, defensive coordinator, etc., John Fox, as a defensive consultant. Now, am I concerned that John Fox is a new defensive consultant for the Detroit Lions? No. Would I have been clamoring for John Fox to come to Green Bay and be their defensive consultant? That doesn't really move the needle all that much for me, if I'm being honest. However, I am clamoring for Green Bay to do something like this. Get some new ideas in the building. You lost Aubrey Pleasant, your one consultant, even though he was working on the offensive side of the ball. You stayed with your defensive staff overall, outside of your cornerbacks coach, basically. You stayed with your offensive staff. You stayed with your special team staff. Some of those moves certainly understandable, but bring some new ideas. Your red zone offense was awful. Your defense did not live up to expectations. Can you get some new ideas in the building? And you're the Detroit Lions, who beat you twice. Go out and they get John Fox as their defensive consultant. Can you go find just an offensive consultant, a defensive consultant, somebody that's going to bring some new ideas to the table, that maybe just have, whatever that you can throw ideas off of, and they have some experience and say, yeah, that's worked in the past. No, that hasn't worked. Or here's a different way that you might be able to do that. I think just getting some new ideas in the building would be really, really fruitful for this franchise. And seeing other teams make those type of moves and Green Bay not do it in a year where they basically stuck with their entire coaching staff, just a little disheartening, because like I said, I would love Green Bay to do something like that. Now, let's get to some good news. Per Bill Huber, who did a great job on his article, basically updating the state of the Packers' injuries. And we'll start with Rashawn Gary. So Brian Gutekunst updated us a couple days ago, basically saying that Rashawn Gary's making great progress. But per Bill Huber, Rashawn Gary's goal is to be ready for opening day and is ahead of schedule. Now, it's probably not going to happen that he's ready opening day. I wouldn't put anything by Rashawn Gary, though. The guy's an absolute freak, a workout warrior. He will do everything in his power to get ready as soon as humanly possible. But it is great news to hear that he is ahead of schedule and that he's even thinking in the mindset that he could be ready for opening day. Don't get your hopes up. If I were a betting man, I would bet almost anything he starts the season on like the PUP list, or like even if he doesn't start the season on the PUP list, they keep him with the hope that they can bring him in sooner, but he probably sits out 2, 3, 4 games, something like that. But even still, the fact that Rashawn Gary is ahead of schedule is great news. So that is amazing. And then Eric Stokes, the mystery ankle injury. It seemed like something maybe more serious that we never really got any real true update on. Kudos to Bill Huber again for getting the update here. Apparently Eric Stokes is on pace to practice at the start of training camp. So it sounds like he may miss OTAs, mini camps, things like that. That's okay. But if he's ready to go day one of training camp, that would be huge. And apparently he has had 0 setbacks and is ahead of schedule. So again, check out Bill Huber's article. There was another injury update on there as well. I won't give out all the details so that you make sure to go check out that as well. But Bill Huber, he put an article out just yesterday on some of the injury updates. So again, make sure to check that out. That does it for news and notes. Let's get to my main topic today, which is going to be a shorter topic, and I have talked a little bit about this already, but my topic today is Keisean Nixon, and he's clearly going to be back in Green Bay, right? Right? This is a very interesting topic of discussion because I think the overarching feel right now is that of course, Keisean Nixon's going to be back. He's not going to break the bank with any other team, and he probably has more value in Green Bay, and they're just going to bring him back, and it's going to be, wipe the hands of it, no big deal. That's just, set that one to the side, right? I'm not so sure. Let's start with Keisean Nixon, right? He has yet to turn 26 years old. He's going to turn 26 soon, but he is yet to turn 26 years old. He is a first-team All-Pro returner from just this past season. He is a core special teams guy, even without being a returner. He had 290 snaps on defense last year in the slot with a 63.9 grade per PFF, a positive grade per me. And he played well in the slot where I don't know that you necessarily are pining for him to be one of your top 3 corners, but you're more than good with him being your number 4 corner, your dime defensive back, and somebody who, if one of your top 3 corners is out, he can fill in. You feel very, very good about that type of positioning for Keisean Nixon. And if he was a team's nickel corner, that's not the worst case scenario in the world based on how he played a season ago too. He only played 290 snaps last year, and he only has 564 snaps in 4 seasons. Now, you might say, well, he's only played 564 snaps. So some team's not going to really break the bank for him. But in those snaps, especially last year and even the year before that, in very minimal snaps for the Raiders, he's looked very good in the slot as a slot corner. For somebody who's not yet turned 26, who has extremely limited wear and tear with only 564 defensive snaps on his record, plus is a core special teamer, plus is a first team All-Pro returner, there is a lot of value in that. So adding to this, and the reason that I wanted to bring this up is Kevin Cole recently did an article and he basically valued defensive players and he said where you can find the best value, and he did it based on win shares. It's a very interesting article. I recommend checking it out. But his valuation of Keisean Nixon was as the 7th best free agent corner in this class. That was not to do with special, that was just purely on cornerback. And if all of a sudden some other team feels that way, now I think that's aggressive, and I don't think he's going to be in that realm. I don't know that he's even going to be in the top 15 of free agent corners this year. Maybe he's somewhere around there. But if one team does view him as a potential legitimate starting caliber corner, I'm not saying one of your top 2, I'm saying one of your top 3, meaning your nickel corner, which is basically a starter in today's NFL. Not basically, which is a starter in today's NFL. If some team views him as that, plus a core special teamer, plus a first team All-Pro returner, he could make a lot of money as an unrestricted free agent in a offseason where Green Bay isn't going to have that much money to go out and spend. And even if they do, they might have to make some very difficult decisions in, do you want to just bring back a Keisean Nixon, or do you want to go try and be aggressive and get a playmaker on your offense? And I'm not saying I wouldn't go after Keisean Nixon. I very much would, but that's going to start getting into some very difficult conversations and decisions for Green Bay. And if Keisean Nixon or his agent or both start getting some indecision from Green Bay of like, oh, what do we want to do here? And some other team comes very aggressively and says, you're our guy. We want you as our top, one of our top 3 corners plus our top returner. Keisean Nixon might say, oh, that sounds pretty nice. And then looks at their contract offer and is like, oh, that's really nice. And all of a sudden, this foregone conclusion that Keisean Nixon is back in Green Bay, maybe, maybe not. I do ultimately think that he probably is. And if the question is, can Green Bay get Keisean Nixon back? The answer is unequivocally yes. If they want Keisean Nixon back bad enough, they can get him back. They will have the resources and availability to do that. There's no question. So again, if the question is, can they get Keisean Nixon back? The answer is yes. Will they is a little bit of a different story. Now let's look at some of the contracts for some various players. And I've gone over a few of these in a past episode already, but I want to just look at this closer. So last year in free agency, a pure slot corner, let's just take Chandon Sullivan, for example, who was okay in Green Bay, right? And the open market, he got a 1-year, $1.75 million deal from the Minnesota Vikings. I think it's fair to say, and remember, Sullivan didn't really have any return, ability, much less first team All-Pro ability, wasn't a core special team, wasn't a really good core special teams guy, anything like that, right? So I think it's fair to say Keisean Nixon's going to get more than 1 year, $1.75 million. All right, Keion Crossen, the ever-popular Keion Crossen, he was 25.8 years old in 2021. He was a former 7th-round pick. Remember, Keisean Nixon going to be, right around that age, and was a former undrafted free agent. Crossen had played some corner, but hadn't played an exorbitant amount, very similar to Keisean Nixon. Crossen played some special teams, was not a core returner, right? Certainly not a first-team All-Pro returner. He received a 3-year, $9.45 million deal in free agency last year. Now, if that's Keisean Nixon's offer and if that's what his ceiling is, you take that in a second. Sign me up for 3 years, 10 mil on Keisean Nixon right now. But this is Keion Crossen, somebody that didn't have, the resume, especially as a returner, and have that real, true All-Pro ability at anything. That's what Keion Crossen got. All right, how about K'Waun Williams? Now, he was a little bit older, 30.7 years of age when he signed his free agent contract. He primarily was a slot corner, had much more experience than Keisean Nixon did at that point. He got a 2-year, $5.2 million deal. So that maybe is, if it was just a corner, maybe in that realm. But I think Nixon, again, because of his special teams and all-pro returning ability, probably goes a little bit more than that. How about Anthony Averett? All right, so last year, now he's an outside corner and had more time as a corner, 27.2 years old when he signed his free agent deal last year. He got a 1-year, $4 million deal. All right, but remember, he wasn't a core returner either, but he was an outside corner, so maybe a little bit more apples to apples when it comes to value there. And then how about we just look at a top returner, right? Last year, Cordarrelle Patterson, who was 31 years old at the time, received a 2-year, $10.5 million deal to be not only the returner for the Falcons, but basically their primary running back as well. Threat out of the backfield, etc. 2 years, $10.5 million. More on that in just a moment. How about somebody that signed with Green Bay? Rasul Douglas. Now, Rasul Douglas was a legitimate starting caliber corner, played a minuscule amount of special teams, not a returner at all. He got 3 years, $21 million. Probably safe to say Nixon's not going to get that. But it's interesting. It's interesting nonetheless. All right. How about Rock Ya-Sin? Now, he had 2,658 career snaps. He had 663 snaps last year with a 65.7 PFF grade. Remember, basically right around where Keisean Nixon was at, with about 300 to 400 more snaps under his belt. Now, he's primarily an outside corner, but does not have return ability, not a core special teams guy, anything like that. Almost the same age. Rock Ya-Sin, his estimated contract per Spotrac is 4 years, $43.5 million, almost $11 million per season. Who's going to bring more to the table, Rock Ya-Sin or Keisean Nixon? All I'm saying is that there could be some exorbitant money out there for players who maybe don't have the same amount of value that Keisean Nixon does. Now, the Cordero Patterson one is an interesting juxtaposition, an interesting comparison for me. All right. So Patterson, 31 years old, Nixon significantly younger. Patterson, some significant wear and tear on his body. Keisean Nixon did not. They both are all pro caliber returners. Patterson had done it for a longer period of time, but Nixon just did it fresh this past season. I don't think there's any question that he can still be that guy, right? Patterson, the better skill position, Patterson is a better running back than Nixon was at corner. No question about that. Patterson, a legitimate playmaker, and was going to be a threat on offense. Nixon, a okay, solid, probably dime defensive back, maybe can help out in your nickel a little bit. That said, Nixon's younger, has less wear and tear, and plays a more premium position at corner than Patterson does at running back. And again, he's just coming off a fresh first-team All-Pro as a returner. But that 2 years, $10.5 million, that kind of sounds about right for Keisean Nixon, and if I'm his agent. Now, if that's the starting point, if that's the rate, I think that gets done. I think Green Bay is in that ballpark. I think they can figure that out. They can add void years. They can make it so that his first year isn't as much. I think they can work with that, and that's probably a fair deal. The only caveat would be that Nixon could potentially say, "Now, I want a little bit more." I want a little bit more length on that contract. Now, he could also say, all right, you know what? I'm going to sign that 2-year, $10 million deal. I'm going to get my 10 mil. And then after that, I'm still in the prime of my career. I can go out and get another big contract if I go out and show out at corner and continue to be a great returner. So that could be more of a deal that makes sense for both sides. So I think the question becomes is, how many years does Nixon want? Just how high does that value get if it gets to $6 million? If it gets to $7 million a season, is Green Bay still interested at that point? And remember, there is a team that is lurking in the division that has a lot of money to spend, and that's the Chicago Bears. Think of this from the Chicago Bears standpoint. They don't really need a slot corner. They got Kyler Gordon there, but they could use a dime defensive back. They could go in that direction. That wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. They could use a core special teamer. But more importantly, if there's any team in the NFL that understands the value of a premium returner, it's probably the Chicago Bears. They have money to spend that they have to figure out something to do with it. And getting maybe the best returner in football with that money, maybe not the worst use, especially if it doesn't completely break the bank on their end, which it won't because they've got so much money to spend, and it robs Green Bay of that player. That could be something that Chicago is very interested in. So that will be one to keep an eye on as well. So you could have the Bears lurking. You could have the Packers trying to figure out if the money is worth what they have available in salary cap space. Like, do they want to use a huge chunk of their open money on Keisean Nixon? That could be a legitimate question. Does Nixon want more upfront money, or is he looking for more longevity in that contract? That could be something that is of interest as well. And I do ultimately think that his value in Green Bay is immense. He's their kick returner. He's their punt returner. He's at worst probably their he's their number 4 corner. Let's just put it that way. He's a core special teams player. And I still think there may be some way where he could actually have a role on offense, even if it's a fake end around or maybe they give it to him a couple times here or there. I do think there still could be a package with Keisean Nixon on offense as well. But he clearly has a lot of value for this team. And they know what he can do. He has that familiarity with Rich Bisaccia. And I do think he probably does end up back in Green Bay. But he is a true unrestricted free agent on a robust market. And there will be a lot of teams that are interested in a game-breaking returner. It just is what it is. He got his name very much in that conversation. And there are those out there that think that he could be a very legitimate corner in this league as well. I'm kind of one of those people. So he's going to have value. He's probably going to get paid, and it's going to be interesting to see if Green Bay is able to compete with any offers that are out there. And if Chicago wants to rob him away with all the money they have, they can probably do that. So I think he's back. I hope he's back. But this will be a very big free agent to keep an eye on when free agency opens in a couple weeks. That is going to do it for me today. Thanks for joining me. Again, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I will see you guys tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.